right, good afternoon, Fort Collins. You are listening to 90.5 KCSU. I'm Rachel Mason.
And I'm Tyler Stupp.
And we are Science CSU, radio show here on KCSU that brings you the latest in all research and sciencey things from faculty and students. Today we are actually sitting here with Katie Phillips. She is a student here at CSU, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about her experiences in Thailand and about the palm oil crisis there. So, Katie, just to kind of start, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're studying here at CSU?
Yeah, so again, my name is Katie. I'm from Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm a sophomore here at CSU. I'm a double major in wildlife conservation biology and German. And that's kind of it about me here at CSU. I'm just kind of a student here, just working with palm oil.
So how'd you develop your interest to where they are now?
So I went to Thailand this summer. It was kind of on a whim. I was really unhappy in my previous major. I was a biology pre-vet major, and I was not enjoying it. So I saw a flyer that said, do you want to come to Thailand? Do you want to work with wildlife? And I was like, yeah, I want to do that. So I signed up, and I was one of 12 from CSU to go to Thailand. And when I went there, I had no idea about the palm oil issue or any of those conservation issues in Southeast Asia. And when I went there, my project leader really introduced me to this issue, and he talked about his work in Indonesia. And then we saw and worked with lots of wildlife that had been displaced due to deforestation and the loss of habitat for the palm oil industry. And that was kind of one of the more haunting experiences, seeing like fields burnt, seeing animals in cages because they can never be released again because they've lost their habitat. And it kind of was one of those things when I came back that I was like, I want to do more with this because it was such a haunting experience and such a impactful experience to have. That's kind of how I got started.
So for those of us who don't know, could you explain like what palm oil is and why there's an issue surrounding it?
Definitely. Okay, so palm oil it comes from the African palm tree, and it's grown in very wet, moist climates. So places like Thailand, Borneo, Indonesia, Sumatra, all those places are really great for growing this crop. It's used in a lot of products as like a preservative or a flavoring agent or a thickener, and it's very inexpensive to produce, especially in Southeast Asia. There's lots of cheap labor, cheap land. It's a very cheap plant to grow and produce. It takes about 3 or 4 years for the first fruit from the palm tree to be harvestable. However, the soil that the plant is grown in can only withstand a maximum of 20 years of growth. So really you get 4 or 5 harvestable growing seasons on these plantations. And this sort of leads to the problem with the plant. It's not the plant itself, it's the agriculture surrounding it and how unsustainable it is, and how they just keep clearing forests to make more room for palm oil plantations as the old ones become less viable. And so it just leads to massive amounts of deforestation in Southeast Asia specifically. 90% of palm oil is grown in Southeast Asia, 98% of that being in Indonesia. And the rate of deforestation has almost tripled in the last 20 years. And so it's really unsustainable and will lead to the loss of the rainforest by 2022 is the latest figure that I've found.
So as you said, the rate of deforestation is increasing at a very rapid pace. What happens when Indonesia, or when the space they have to clear the forests runs out?
So there are sort of 3 issues that I would say would happen with that. The first I'm going to start with is carbon emissions. As more forests are cleared, you release more carbon into the atmosphere from burning, from draining peatlands. And rainforests are like a carbon sink, so they reduce carbon emissions that we release from just everyday driving your car, in Indonesia with the deforestation. And when those are gone, we're still going to keep emitting carbon, but we're going to lose those like really important carbon sinks. And so climate change is just going to keep being worse, and it's going to start compounding the issue. The next, I would say, is you lose a lot of biodiversity. 30% of the world's biodiversity resides in Southeast Asia, and a lot of those are really crucial to the survival of the rainforests. And again, the rainforests are carbon sinks. So it is just a spiral effect where if you lose those species that keep the rainforest going, and then you lose the rainforest, there's almost no way that you're going to get the rainforest back to where it was, let's say, 100 years ago. And then the last I would say is there are global repercussions, not only environmentally, but socially. So palm oil is one crop in that area that we grow, but there are also other things we get from the rainforest. Like 25% of modern medicine comes from the Southeast Asian rainforests. And so when you lose that, we're going to lose a lot of our sources for medicines, for other products that don't just contain palm oil. So it's really unsustainable to have one crop be the culprit basically for clearing all of the rainforests in this area.
And so you mentioned that people are clearing these rainforests and basically making them into agricultural fields for this crop. Do people use these lands again and again to harvest this crop, or does the soil become viable again?
It will, but it takes a very long time. The palm oil plant, again, it drains the soil of all the nutrients that needs to grow plants just in general, and it takes about 20 years for all those to be sucked dry by these plantations because they're so pushing to get as many crops as they can and as much palm oil as they can to sell, obviously, to manufacturers. I don't know the exact number, but it takes a very long time to reestablish that healthy soil and that soil that's able to support a rainforest or just any other plant. So it takes a very long time to reestablish that.
Right, and how dependent would you say is society on palm oil today?
That's a very interesting question. In the U.S., 50% of our goods have palm oil in them, and that can be anything from baked goods, confectionery items, cosmetics, body products, cleaning agents. It's in half of everything that you use every day, and possibly more depending on what you buy. So I'd say we're very dependent on palm oil. A third of the United States oil importation is palm oil, and we're a huge contributor to the global demand for palm oil, as well as other countries like Australia, the United Kingdom.
And when you say 1/3 of the United States palm oil, is that in the same league as like regular crude oil? Or?
No, let me clarify that. Yeah, so it's a third of our edible oils. So a third of our edible oils are palm oil. So that's going to be things like palm oil, soybean oil, cottonseed oil, just those kind of oils that you find in your products that you don't necessarily buy an olive oil, but you buy in a product.
Right. And what does palm seed oil do in a food? What role does it serve?
It serves a lot of roles. Again, it can be flavoring, change the consistency so it's more of a gel or a liquid. Sometimes it acts as a preservative. There's lots of ranges for what palm oil can be used for. But the problem is that the more we depend on it, the more damage we do to our globe and world as a whole.
And is there any alternatives to palm oil?
Yes, there are. There are things like rapeseed oil, cottonseed oil, soybean oil, vegetable oils that do not contain any derivative of palm oil. So there are lots of options out there, and there are products that don't even contain edible oils. So it's not that we necessarily need palm oil in all of our products. It's that there are other alternatives that are more sustainable that we should start turning towards as a society.
So do you think that if we were to switch oils and kind of go away from the palm oil, how much more sustainable is harvesting things for all these other oils? Do you ever think that it will get to a point where it's unsustainable to harvest anything because of the demand for it?
I think definitely there's always a point, everything in moderation. So if we overproduce almost anything in these big scales, like there's going to become a point where it's unsustainable. And palm oil won't go away necessarily, but it's more about looking at our agricultural practices around these palm oil plants and finding solutions where we can harvest them multiple times on the same plot, or finding other locations that maybe are a little bit more synthetic or less in these really rich environments, places where we can make the agricultural practices more sustainable.
And you can only have 4 or 5 yields of a palm seed tree in the plot. Exactly what does the palm seed tree do to the soil that makes it very hard to grow more than 4 or 5 times?
I don't know the specifics, but I know that it relies so much on the nutrients in the soil, and because these companies want, obviously, to have the maximum yield with each harvesting season, they basically drain the soil of chemicals and compounds that are really important to supporting plant life. So things like nitrogen, things that the plants can use to create sugars and things like that to keep the plants going. So when they push these plantations to produce a maximum yield, after 20 years, the soil, it can't support that life anymore because it's lost those essential compounds to keep plant life going.
Right. Okay.
So changing gears a little bit, when these deforestations happen and when people are kind of preparing the land to support this kind of a crop, what happens with all the wildlife in the area? How exactly do they go about deforesting these massive forests that have been there for thousands of years?
Yeah, so one of the main methods that these fields are deforested is through slash and burn, which basically is they go in and they cut down as many trees as they can, sell them off, and then they set the field on fire. They just let it burn until it's completely just down to the dirt, everything's been burnt up, and they turn up the soil and plant the palm trees. Now, the wildlife, a lot of them are considered pest animals in this area. Things like orangutans or elephants, things that we consider very endangered, very important species, are considered pests. So they just sort of don't care. They just leave them there and set the field on fire, and a lot of wildlife is lost in that initial burning of the fields. And then after that, when the field is now just kind of an empty, barren land, the wildlife is still there and still wandering around, and then poachers and wildlife traders can come in and collect them and then sell them onto these black markets. And when I was in Thailand, I worked a lot with animals that had been on the black market due to loss of habitat, and a lot of them are mistreated to the point of just being disfigured. They are either chronically depressed, they've reached a nervous breakdown, and they're used in things like circuses or tourist attractions. It was just sad to see, honestly. There's no other way to put it. It's just depressing to see that this rich environment is just being sold for attractions and circuses and palm oil. It's really sad.
Are there any current things happening over there that are kind of helping to get these animals out of there?
Definitely. I can only speak from my experiences in Thailand. I don't know about the whole region, but I know the Thai government is working really hard in establishing government holding centers for bringing in wildlife that they catch on the black market in bigger cities that are being sold. And they try to keep them in the best conditions that they can, but there's so much volume of wildlife that has been displaced and put on the black market that the conditions are not that great. Like, for example, they can only afford so much like fresh fruit and vegetables and fresh meat for these animals and wildlife that they bring in, that they've started turning towards dog food and giving dog food to things like Asiatic bears, who are primarily, they eat plants and vegetables and they're herbivores rather than just meat and just dog food. So a lot of the animals are malnourished, they can be overweight, they're in very bad conditions, but it's kind of bittersweet because they're not on the market, but they're not in great conditions, if that makes sense.
Bad conditions, but good people.
Exactly.
Right, and I mean, how many people would you say, just from your experience, are aware of this issue and think that it's bad what's happening?
When I was abroad, a lot of the people knew about it because they're very much in that region of the world. When I came back, I would, for example, I talked to my family and I was like, have you heard about palm oil before? They had no idea what I was talking about. I had to go find a can of soup and show them like that palm oil exists in a lot of our products. And like a lot of my friends didn't know about it. So that was kind of a shock because I became so immersed in it that I thought that, oh, everyone's got to know about this. But a lot of people don't, and that's one of the big issues is awareness and how a lot of people don't actually know the repercussions of this crop.
So would you say that awareness, I guess both in the United States but also in places like Thailand, do you think that that's more of the issue, or do you think it's, I mean, I guess especially in Thailand, do you think the issue is more that people just don't care and they're just in it for the profit and kind of supplying the massive demand that we have for palm oil?
I think it's a little bit of both, because if you aren't aware of the issues and you aren't aware of the products that contain palm oil, then you're just going to continually like support that company that uses palm oil. And I think the other part of it is definitely like the greed aspect, where it's such a cheap product to produce and then can be sold in these big brands and make a lot of money, that they don't care because they want the money is definitely a huge part of it. But I think as consumers, awareness is a big issue.
But if every single brand uses palm oil, what steps can you take to exclude it?
Well, not all brands contain palm oil. About 50% of U.S. products do. So there is definitely alternatives that are available. Personally, I try to not buy products with palm oil. And I am that nerd in the store that reads the labels obsessively and makes sure that when I support a company, it doesn't contain palm oil. And that's sort of a huge change that I've made in my life that was hard at first, but like as I have gotten more into it, it's not as difficult anymore. I've also written letters to companies almost to the point where like it's creepy, I guess. But I write letters, I tell them this is not okay, this is not a good product to support. I'm not going to, as a consumer, support you if you continue to farm palm oil in this unsustainable way. So those are sort of steps that I have taken in trying to avoid palm oil, trying to make people more aware of it.
And what is one really easy thing everybody can do?
Read your labels. That's the easiest thing that you can probably do. It's very easy to see if something has palm oil in it. Just start reading your labels. It's really helpful, and you'll get a lot better at it.
So what do people need to look for in a label? I mean, is it, does palm oil go by any other name other than palm oil?
Yes, there are definitely a lot of names for palm oil, but once you start reading the labels and sort of figuring out what's palm oil and what's not palm oil, you get very quick at identifying it. A lot of times it'll be listed as vegetable oil, and then after vegetable oil there'll be parentheses and it'll say palm oil or some derivative of the word palm, so things like palminate, palmtate, and the root of the word will contain palm. So that's a very easy way to get started. Personally, I don't know all of the like 170 plus names, like scientific names for palm oil, and not everyone's going to know that. So just look at your products, read them. There's apps out there and you can use those. Those are helpful too. I use the app. It's called Palm Oil Guide and Scanner. And I believe it's by the El Paso Zoo. They've put it out, and it has probably the largest database that I've come across in apps that scan for palm oil. The hard thing is using it on seasonal items, so like special Halloween candy, special Christmas foods. Sometimes those aren't in the database just because they only come out once or twice a year, and that's when you want to read your labels really carefully. But I think it's a great app. I use it all the time. You scan the little barcode on the item, and it'll say rainforest friendly, rainforest not friendly. I use that one a lot, so...
What about pumpkin spice lattes? Palm oil free?
I mean...
Actually, I did find Coffee Mate cream that's pumpkin spice flavored that is palm oil free. So...
There you go.
I use that.
You can still have your pumpkin spice lattes and support the rainforest.
No excuses. So we talked about this a little bit before, but what do you personally think it's going to take for everybody to kind of get on this bandwagon and stop using palm oil, and especially for those in Thailand in this industry to stop deforesting all of the rainforests for this crop?
I think it really lies in the power that the consumer has, and I don't think a lot of people realize that as a consumer we have a lot of power in how we dictate what products we want to see on our shelves and what ingredients we want to see in those products. A great place to start, again, is reading your labels, using the app, starting there. The next step, I would say, is writing letters, being more aggressive about telling these companies, like, we don't want to support you as a consumer. And that has a lot of weight for these companies because, again, they're trying to make money. They're trying to sell you their product. And they don't necessarily think about what goes into making their product and the consequences that go into making their products. So when you say, I'm a consumer, I'm not going to support your product because it contains palm oil or because it contains this ingredient because it's unsustainable, and I'm going to stop buying your product. If everyone sent one letter like that, then that has a lot of weight. That shows the company that is bad because I want to make that money. I want to sell that person our product, and they're not going to buy it anymore because it contains palm oil. Let's look at ways where we can eliminate palm oil, reduce palm oil, so that those consumers will continue to buy our product and give us their money. So I think, again, as a consumer, you carry a lot of power to make a change like this.
And do you think that if we ever do get away from the palm oil, do you think that it's ever possible for the rainforest to be as viable and in the condition that they once were?
I believe so. It will take time. It will take a lot of time because that's a very rich environment, and that takes a lot of time to establish, and it's a slow process. But I think that if we can create a more sustainable agriculture that works with the environment and sustains the environment, then I think that there is still a chance for it. But it would take time.
I don't think people, because at least here in Colorado, we're so far removed from the rainforest, that's almost not a big deal for us. But I think people forget like how important it is. Even though rainforests may be a small part of our overall forests globally, I think they actually produce a majority of the oxygen we breathe right now.
They do. They definitely do. Like I said before, they reduce carbon emissions. They're carbon sinks. So they bring
All
in...
plants are.
Yeah, exactly. And in addition, contain 30% of the world's biodiversity. And we're still finding new species there every day. And we're going to lose the opportunity to look at these species, study them, look at how they work, and look at that whole system as a whole with all these new species and wildlife there if we just destroy it, if we just let it go.
And for everyone who doesn't really know, this is really important because the study of new species leads to...
I would say it leads to more background on other species, looking at ecosystems as a whole and being able to realize how to further manage ecosystems, how to further manage wildlife, how to further sustain these very rich environments.
And I think it also should be noted that, like you said before, we get a lot of our medicines from rainforests. So if we get rid of those, we're really getting rid of a lot of our medicinal products, all of these diseases that we're trying to cure today.
And the other thing is, I kind of became more aware of this more recently when I was doing more research on this. The people of the region, the native people, the rainforest is their life. Their culture is based on the rainforest, along with food, water, how they survive. And a lot of companies disregard that, and they will sign a contract for X number of acres or X amount of land, and then they go beyond that, and they continually push beyond that. And a lot of these people are losing their homes, their lives, that have been there for thousands of years, for generations and generations, and they're almost powerless to stop it because these corporations have such a hold on the region. And it's disappointing. It's not only an environmental issue, it's a social issue, and I think more people should be aware of that aspect too.
And these corporations are really powerful. That's why in economics they're called non-state players, because they still have all the power pretty much of a government. They're just not a government, but they still have tons of power.
And they keep a lot of these local people almost enslaved in a sense where, okay, you have to work for us, but if you don't work for us, if you work against us, if you're trying to keep this land as a rainforest or not for palm oil, we're not going to pay you, and your family's going to starve, and you're going to lose your home, and you're going to lose your place in your unit, in your local village. And that's the hold they have on these people, so they almost have no choice, and they are cultivating what used to be their home and their cultural place of worship, going to find food, getting water. It's their home.
So other than personally just kind of changing your whole diet, I guess, around not having palm oil included, are you doing anything else to get the issue out there and get people aware of what's going on?
Yeah, I recently gave kind of a presentation on palm oil and what I did in Thailand to the Society for Conservation Biology, and now I'm working closely with them. And we've sort of established what I call a palm oil committee. And we're trying to work closely with administration on campus to try to work towards a palm oil-free dining experience. Something on campus with the CSU dining halls where we can try to reduce palm oil, where we can try to take the ingredients that we buy now and eliminate or reduce what palm oil products are in that ingredient list. It's very new, very starting out right now, but that's our goal, and that's what we're trying to work for, and that will make a measurable impact if an entire university can reduce the amount of palm oil that we use. That's a huge win. That's going to set standards across the United States as the first campus that can do this. And if things like that continue, if big measurable impacts like that continue, we'll just keep going, and more people will be aware. More people will stop buying palm oil, and it'll just keep snowballing till the companies realize that this is really not okay. This is not an okay thing to do in this region to these people, to this environment.
And what obstacles does a university face in buying food for a dining hall to be palm oil free or reduced? Because I would imagine buying food in bulk without palm oil is really hard.
It is. And again, this is all very preliminary right now. We're still in the first steps of this. And I think it would take just extra time to look for alternatives, because they're definitely out there. They exist. And if you tell a major producer, like, I'm not going to buy your product, I'm going to go buy it from person B because you contain palm oil, then that producer goes, oh, wait, maybe we should change our game plan. Maybe we want to keep that client. So it's just about looking for the alternative. And it may take an extra 5 minutes, an extra hour, but it is really impactful, and it will benefit everyone in the long run.
There we go.
Well, thanks for being with us here today, Katie.
Thanks for having me.
It was wonderful hearing about the palm oil crisis.
And we are on every single Sunday from 4 to 5 p.m. So if you liked what you heard today, you can always find us at this time every week. provided we do not have technical difficulties.
And that again is 90.5 KCSU. We are Science CSU.
And we're signing off.